Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the One More Jump podcast by Rise Pole Vault. Today we have a special guest. It's my brother who just recently retired from pole vaulting. He had just a storybook career, unbelievable accomplishments by Luke, my brother. And I really wanted to sit down with him and talk to him about his retirement and about his career before all of the feelings wore off. Because when you get done with something, usually there's a limited window that you can remember and recall exactly what it feels like to have done what he just did. And I thought it'd be cool just to reflect and just see how he's feeling and what his plans are in the future. And just kind of a podcast dedicated to Luke and his career and all the cool things that he got to do. So hope you guys enjoy this podcast with Luke Winder. Have you ever thought about how rare it is to have the career in pole vaulting that you had, and that so many people would kill to just have a little tiny piece of it, just a state championship or an all-state or one national championship or one time to go and vault in an elite meet, one time over 570 or 550 or whatever? Have you ever thought about how rare it is that happened?
Right there, it made it seem a lot crazier whenever you spell it out like that. But I think whenever I qualified for the World Championship team in 2022, that was whenever it really hit, I'm doing the things that I wanted to do whenever I was junior, senior in high school, really knew I wanted to push this thing to the next level. But it's so hard to have, it's so important to have the perspective of the average high school kid who is just trying to qualify for state for one time, Mm-hmm. And that the thing is that never bypassed me or you or Josh or any of the other really good vaulters. We all went through that phase. It's just that it happened a lot earlier. So for me, freshman year of high school, it was, I just want to get to the state meet just like everybody else, just trying to get, as best I can. The only difference is just that I was a freshman. But that doesn't discount the fact that I started being around pole vaulting since I was 5 years old probably, and started really pole vaulting at 8 or 9 years old. And so by the time I'm a freshman, I've vaulted and had experience around pole vault longer than most people have when they finish their halfway through college. You know what I mean? That right. Many years involved with it. So it's I've gone through all of the phases of, holy cow, this is cool, I just went to state. But then after you go to state and you don't do well in the prelim, then the next year it's man, I want to go to state, get to the final. Right. And then you do well in the final, but you don't win. And then you're well, now I want to go to state and I want to win. And then I won, and then it's okay, well, now I want to go to state, win, and set a state record. And it just keeps kind of building on top of all that stuff. And then there was a little gap there where I felt I kind of hit a bit of a plateau. But again, you're talking about with perspective, it's my plateau was that I just hadn't jumped 18 feet. You know what I mean? In a few years or whatever. And it actually was a pretty long plateau period of not jumping what I wanted to jump. But that doesn't discount the fact that I was still jumping mid-17s, and many people would love to do that. So it's crazy when you say it, though. There is a lot to be grateful for, and I'm aware of that. So I'm just thankful to be where I'm at and have accomplished what I have, and kind of had that success span through a long period of time, because even though there was some plateaus in there, it made the success later in my 20s feel that much more rewarding, where I think most people later in their 20s is where it starts to kind of dwindle. Mm-hmm. And I was thankful, or I was blessed enough to be able to have some good jumping, obviously, throughout all of my years, but then maybe have like an extra, like a rebirth almost whenever I was 25, 26. And that was pretty sick.
Pole rentals are crucial at the Rise Pole Vault Training Center, providing athletes the right pole at the right time without the hefty price tag. The problem is, managing rentals was a nightmare, with spreadsheets and logs leading to missing poles and missing payments. We faced a tough decision: stop renting poles or hire someone to manage them. Enter PVR, the game-changing app that streamlines rentals. Available on iOS and Android, PVR acts like a full-time rental employee without the cost, managing payments, records, and offering a growing list of features to turn rentals into an invaluable service. Interested? Contact support at risepolevault.com or DM us on Instagram for details. Discover how PVR revolutionizes the pole rental experience today. Yeah, and you're sitting across the table from somebody who just wanted a tiny piece of that. Like I wanted to jump 19 one time. I wanted to, 580 one time, qualify for one team, one U.S. team. And it's really crazy because there are so many people out there like that are just like, man, and so many really, really talented vaulters that they'll never have that. And it's really crazy to think that you got the opportunity to do that. And yeah, I think most people don't understand that, like, when you get to that level, that like elite level, like everyone always thinks that everyone's just trying to win a gold medal at the Olympics. And when you get to that level, it's almost like, no, like winning a gold medal at the Olympics would be really cool, but like I just want to qualify for a team and experience just like one time.
Especially in the U.S., like giving perspective to the high school kids, I guess, that are watching this that may not understand, like the U.S. team, I don't know the exact number on this, but probably out of the top 40 in the world, I would say 25 of those are the 25 people who qualified for the Olympic trials.
Right.
And so it's like out of the top 40 on the entire globe, we have over half of those people by far that we're competing with to get spots on a team. So we're competing with Sam Kendricks, who just got the silver medal, and
right.
Chris, who's been at the Olympics before, and Jacob Wooten, who's a multiple, 19-footer. And every single year, though, it's not like, oh, there's a drought. It's like, no, there's 20 people who are capable of jumping 19 feet.
Well, when you came up, because
Yeah.
when I came up, it was not like that. Like it is really crazy. And I think personally, that we're starting to see the effects of private pole vaulting, like gyms and clubs and stuff like that, because you came up with a group of vaulters that just like set the world on fire, to where it's like you can't do anything. You can't even qualify for a team if you jump 580 on that day. Like you got to jump, for a lot of them you have to jump like 85 or whatever.
I think it was 86 maybe at this one.
At this last
either 82
one.
or 86.
Yeah, and it's crazy. It's just nuts. Like that's another thing that's really cool about your career is you can say that you were vaulting with the best ever in the history of the world. Like that's by far and away the best group of pole vaulters, ever.
Pretty sick. World. Yeah, that's one thing I like to take pride in, is just that even though I didn't go out and make 5 championship teams or whatever, I'm competing against the dudes who did do that, you know, and like competed against Mondo a couple times, and like competed against the best in the U.S., which are also the best in the world a lot of times. And yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like there's a lot of things that have to line up. I jumped 19 feet the year that I got last place at the U.S. Outdoor Championships. So it's like, it's not a guarantee that each year you're jumping perfect, that you're going to go to the U.S. Championships and jump out of this world.
Mm-hmm.
And then this past year, 2024, out of 22, 23, 24 technically, I jumped a couple centimeters lower than I had in a year, but I was a lot more consistent and went to the U.S. Championships, made the final, got sixth place. And so it's funny how it works like that. Like, I think sometimes it feels like there could be a golden ticket. If you just jump the 6-meter bar, if you just do this, like if you just do that, it's all going to be good and I'm going to make all the teams. And it's like, it's no guarantee, like some random people could pop off. I'm one of the random people who popped off when other people had a rough day, like, and it's just how it is. It's how the cookie crumbles sometimes.
It is really crazy, because that's another misconception that most young pole vaulters don't realize, is that like there are vaulters that just burn super hot. Like, it's just like they just go on these crazy ascents where they make these crazy high bars, but they fizzle out too. Like, there's a lot. I mean, we've seen it time and time again. State championship, national championships, U.S. championships, where it's like, oh, well, that guy jumped this high. And it's like, dude, it does not matter. It really does not matter. It's all about just the consistency. And that's a huge misconception, is people count themselves out all the time, where it's like they go into a championship meet and it's like, we're competing for second today, because this person jumped this high 5 months ago. It's like, it doesn't make any sense at all,
That's why somebody like Sam, like Kendricks, there's been a few people who have like really changed the pole vault game, like actually full on, like you can see a direct correlation between this vaulter and, something that's changed. And Sam is one of those people where it's just like, the value of consistency, I think, I don't know if it inspired high school vaulters to think this way, but it inspired a lot of other coaches, I think, to start believing more in maybe we don't have to grip higher than everybody else and be on a bigger pole than everybody else.
Yeah.
Because we can still beat them on the day of if we're just the most consistent vaulter out there and can execute some things perfectly.
They're so tactical.
Yeah.
Like that, like Scott and Sam, like they're just very tactical.
Yep.
And on Scott's podcast that I did with him, you could see that. It's just like journals and notes and, averages and this and that. And it's just like super, super tactical. And we directly stole some of that too. Like some of that idea of like, all right, let's just take a deep breath here and let's just do what we do really, really well. Like, let's just do our thing really well.
And the consistency of an approach, and I don't mean like your run, like an approach to the pole vault over a long period of time. I think that's the thing, is that I don't think elite vaulters get caught up in this as much. That's why they're elite. But like high schoolers or college kids even, they get caught up into a different, I'll use myself as an example. Through the end of college and like early out of college, start thinking that I know what I'm doing and don't, I can kind of do things on my own a bit more and start taking information from different people or whatever. Not that I ever got coached by anybody else. I didn't. Just like having ideas of like, oh, this person jumps this way or runs this way or on this size pole, maybe I should start doing this. And it's like you're steering away from the consistency of something you've been working on since you're 8 years old and like building that on top of that and, each year kind of building on top of each other. And then you get into a thing where you're completely changing what you think of and putting yourself in a position of just like the consistency in your vaulting is waning because the consistency in your thought process is as well. And I think you kind of slapped me back onto the right track of like, let's stick with what always is like the foundation of like, let's get better at these few things that you have drifted away from. And now we'll try to dial this back in and not think about really anything else other than that until you're done vaulting. Right. And it was like a couple technical cues that were needed to be put in place. And it was very similar to like when I'm in high school, it was like jump, push, finish, like do those three things and you're good to go. Like just kind of get on the runway, do your thing and like have a couple things in your head. But slowly you start getting into where you think you have to think about more things, because that's how an elite vaulter gets better, is thinking way more, which I think is the complete opposite.
Yeah.
I think it's just like having the humility to give somebody else the control a little bit and go on the runway and be the elite athlete, but let the coach tell you what they see. That's why you got to have somebody.
I would say that's probably, like, when I took over your training, I would say that's probably why you had the success you had, was because I saw a change. Like you said, that you kind of like went through like almost like another maturity phase, like in your mid to late 20s. And whenever we started working together, I think the biggest thing that you did well was you were able to stick with stuff for a very long period of time. Like you were able to like push through the monotony. You were able to push through the bad times. You didn't just like have a bad meet and throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, you weren't just like, all right, hey, we're going to do this thing and we're all fired up about it and we're going to execute these cues. We're doing this training and we're all fired up and we're having good practices. And then you have a bad meet and then you're like, that doesn't work. All right, we're on to the next thing. What are we doing now? And it's like, no, you were really, really good at being able to have setbacks and not lose faith in the simple training that we were doing.
Well, I appreciate it, you saying that. The thing that I would include in there is that it takes a very inconfident person to be acting in desperation. So like I was in desperation of like, this might be my last couple years of vaulting. I'm super inconfident anytime something goes wrong. Mm-hmm. So initially, I was really bad at what you just said. I think because I didn't have, long story short, it was like my dad coached me and then I just thought I kind of knew what I needed to do and started to take it over myself, where every coach knows, me included, if a athlete does that to me, it's kind of like, well, you're on your own thing. You're not listening to anything I say anyways. So it's like, I'll be here to help you if you want my guidance, but I know you don't really you're not really wanting it right now. And I think at the tail end of that, I was in such like desperation of like, I just want to jump what I know I can jump. Like I know I can jump higher. I'm searching for every single thing that I can. And I'm not confident in anybody to help me with it. I'm not confident in any technique, any pole size, anything like that. And then whenever we started working together, that was the big thing, was just trying to build. We had a post of this on Rise training, or on the Rise pole vault Instagram the other day, about like building confidence on top of confidence. And I started off the first workout we had running through basically I'm not a run through dude. Never was, never have been. But that day, Jake was coaching me on Zoom. He was a PE teacher and was coaching me on Zoom during his lunch break. And I couldn't like take up a jump from 7 lefts, like gripping real low. And from that point, I just realized how like desperate I was, that it was almost like the desperateness kicked me to such a low point in my vaulting that I was like, I need to just like give in all the way and just kind of let go. And if it doesn't happen, I'll just end up retiring. And I was probably like going to be done at the end of that year if it just didn't work. And then it just started to slowly snowball into something crazy. And then next thing you know, it was like, dang, we're at the World Championships. How'd this happen?
That was a crazy run. Yeah. That is how it happens, though. And that's how it happened in my career. And we've seen it happen in other people's lives and their careers, like time and time and time again. It's just, you can't just be grasping at every single little thing that comes your way. Like, it's like, and especially now, like with YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and all the stuff, it's just like, there's so much stuff being pumped into your brain. It's like, oh, this person on YouTube is saying that, I need to be training this way. And then this person over here is saying that that's the complete opposite. And like, there's so many little ticky-tacky exercises. That was another huge thing that we did too, is just get rid of just the bullshit. Like, like all those little ticky-tacky exercises. I remember putting you through that filter, like just kind of like a bullshit filter. Like, why do you do that exercise? And you'd start naming off some stuff, and I'd be like, it's gone.
Yeah.
All right, what's the next exercise? You do that one? Why do you do that? Yep, gone.
Yeah.
It's like, and then we got it whittled down to like just a very simple core group of exercises that worked really, really well and had been time tested over time.
Yeah.
And these are exercises, you know, that people have used for so long, you know, and they worked well. And it would be hard as a young person to know which way is up and which way is down, and like, what should I do? But the thing is you got to just pick something and you just got to stick with it.
Got to stick with it. That's
You
a
know?
big thing, is like the amount of times, like the most frustrating thing as a coach, and now I see how annoying it is, like looking back, well, probably like 10 years. That's crazy. Whenever I was in like college, you know, and you start jumping kind of well, start feeling like you have a little bit of confidence and know what you're doing. And you start just like, after workouts, it's like, hey, you know, what about this exercise, or what about this, or hey, what about we do this with my technique or this? And it's like, well, you just had a great workout. What's the point of like going and deconstructing and trying to find, like, I remember you used to say, don't try to find a reason to make yourself bad. Like, you'd be like, don't try to be the reason why you start jumping bad.
Yeah.
If you're jumping well, just let it be good. Like, don't let it be good, and don't try to look for a reason why, like, oh my gosh, it's all good, there has to be something I can fix, right? It's like, no, just let it be good. Like, have a couple workouts that go well, and don't try to find yourself a reason why to make it bad, you know?
100%. That's it's hard because pole vaulters are notorious for self-sabotage. They're very good at that, especially as you get better and like more elite and people start chirping in your ear, you know. And that's the other thing too, is people need to realize too that like once you start getting better, people start paying more attention to you. And then this coach all of a sudden sends you a text message, and it's like, oh my gosh, this coach just sent me a text message. Holy cow. And then it's like anything that person says, you're like so just jazzed up about like how that person interacted with you that you'll just do anything that they say. And it's like, you know, you don't really even know that coach. Like, you know their name, but you don't really know what's going on. And that it's so crazy, like, to watch people just go every which way the wind blows, you know. But what will you miss the most, do you think, about not vaulting competitively?
The main thing, there's really only like one thing. I'm sure we'll get to the whole story of like why I retired at some point, but like,
actually, let's start with that.
We'll start with that. So mainly the main reason I retired was so last year I had the whole year. Then after the Olympic trials, like 2 days after I got home, I had to get surgery and get my appendix out. That's not why I retired. Long story. This 2024 was after 2022. I remember you saying it's only going to get harder from here, because then after you make a world team, it's like you put the expectation on yourself. You feel like everybody's got the expectation on you. 2023 was not that. I mean, like, I jumped well indoors. I got like fifth, jumped 570 or something at the indoor USAs. I just kind of was happy to be after I made the world team. I just wanted to make sure I still like stood my ground and made sure that I was still like competitive amongst everybody.
You wanted
at
to
the
make sure that
championships.
People like didn't think that it was like a fluke. Like,
yeah, and I don't think it was. I mean, I finished in the top, within the medals or within the money at like every U.S. championship, minus maybe one after that.
Right.
So I was pretty proud of that. But after, in the middle of the indoors last year, I have a note written in my phone. I'm going to grab it really quick.
Yeah, grab it. We'll be back shortly.
All right.
You got it.
I just, I think you had me write this down either for future reference or just to plan my training around it. But it basically is what I went through last year. I got to find this. Oh, here we go. 2024. Okay. So this was my indoor season leading into the outdoors. So this kind of explains the appendix situation, and also this last year was like a pretty, I don't want to say hard year. I jumped really well. I'm very thankful for what I did. I don't mean it in like a way of saying I didn't jump well. I'm up to par with what I wanted to jump and everything. But so January 12th was Reno Pole Vault Summit. I jumped 572. That matched the highest jump I jumped last year. I jumped it at Reno, and then I jumped it at my last meet before the Olympic trials. Then the next week, I got the flu. And so from January 15th to 19th was out, or that whole week I was out with the flu, like lost like 7 pounds. Lost 7 pounds, puking and all that, sorry. January 22nd, returned to training. January 27th, I got the second strain of the flu. Yep. And so I lost another like 3 pounds, like throwing up, all that stuff. February 2nd to the 15th was the only prep time other than leading up to Reno that I had to prep for the U.S. Indoor Championships. And then February 16th, USA Indoors, jumped 565, got 7th. This is funny. And then February 19th to March 13th, I had a month of like building up to the outdoor season, trying to get my strength back and everything after all the weight that I lost. And then March 12th, I got appendicitis and was in the hospital for 2 days. And I ended up not getting my appendix out, but I got some antibiotic treatment that would help kind of stave off the appendicitis so that I could still compete throughout the year. And so that happened like March 12th to 13th, or 12th to 14th, I was in the hospital. And then March 15th, I resumed training. Right after I got out of the hospital, I drove right to Rise and did a sprint workout and everything. But that leads into basically outdoors. Then I had like a normal outdoor season and, was jumping well. Obviously, there could have been some hold back off of like what I had to experience indoors with like my training and everything. But I think that was kind of a blessing in disguise because it allowed me to feel really, really fresh heading into my last few meets of the season. And then right after the Olympic trials, 2 days later, I felt some pain in my stomach again and had to get my appendix removed this time because they basically were like, if it already had happened again, you got to get it done. So then that kicked me into having like a month off, and we kind of knew my season was done at that point. So it was June 22nd or whatever the Olympic trials was. Then I had like a month off. So basically all of July I was off. But I had like a 2-week period where I had to literally be completely off. I couldn't do anything because of my stitches and everything that were in my stomach. But then throughout July, I started like play around vaulting and like sprinting a little bit and just trying to get my body. They say after you have a surgery like that, you got to get your body moving, make sure you don't build up a lot of scar tissue. So I started working out a little bit, trying to get my body back into condition for that. And then there was kind of a big debate because the next U.S. Championship outdoors I had heard was going to be in August, which ended up being true. And so I was like, dude, it's July. And like, what are we thinking about this? Like, it's over a year until the next outdoor championship. And I don't want to like go crazy on training and then end up having to have like indoors, but then take a break outdoor. I was just kind of figuring that out. And then as that started to approach, like the fall training and everything, I had that extra time off of competing that allowed me to be able to go and like spend a lot of time with my wife, with friends, family. I got a dog. I was able to like spend a lot more time at home. So like days that I coach at Rise, I'm coaching until about 9, and I wouldn't get home until 10, but I would have left my house at 10 a.m. To come here. So I would leave at 10 a.m., get here, work out, wait around, do other work that I need to do, then go and coach. and then not get home until 10 p.m. So I realized how much time I was really spending here, which isn't a bad thing, but I was like,
spending
man,
here training
and
because
like
of training.
yeah, because of training, and just because like we're in Illinois, so like when the weather's not good, there is nowhere to sprint other than like Rise, or if you have access to a college. So it's like, it's really the end, like vaulting and stuff. I'm not vaulting at like a local high school or anything. So it's like I'm jumping at Rise. I've got a great facility, but it gave me the perspective of how much time I had spent away from doing other things that I want to do, going to concerts, going to playing the drums, playing guitar, like hanging out with my dog and my wife, and like being able to go on trips with her that don't revolve around me, being able to go and do things that I want to do between the months of like November and August, which is a long stretch of time.
It's a huge chunk.
And so it's like I started to like really think about that, and I promised myself a couple things whenever I was younger. I was like, one, I don't want to get to a point where I start having a downfall in my vaulting career. So I don't want to like jump and then stretch it out for too long and either end not on my own terms because of an injury. I really didn't want that. Like I really did not want to end on an injury. And I really didn't want to end in the same mental state that I was in like 2020, 2021, whenever like we're just kind of returning. I was in a decent mental state there, but I just mean like, just feeling like I'm scraping the can, like trying to get what I can, at these meets and like see if people will let me in. Like I just didn't want to deal with that. I was like, I'd rather be in it and doing it good, or I'd rather just be done. Like after that, I don't want to like go decrease down and have to do it that way. So
people start feeling sorry for you.
People start feeling sorry for you. You start being the guy that they're like, should we still let in? And I wasn't at that point, nowhere near that point with vaulting. And that's why I think it was so surprising. And then the other point was, whenever I was younger, I knew I loved pole vault so much that if I knew that there was any sense of like, maybe I'll be done. Like even if there was a tiny little bit, I'll know it's my time, because I don't want to do a disservice to the sport that's taught me so much over the last 20 something years. And it's like the amount of time I've invested into the sport, I'm not willing to drag that on to a point where I get frustrated or get pissed at the sport or feel like I don't want to be around it anymore or feel like I don't want to coach or anything like that. And not just for the sake of Rise, because it's my full-time job, but just that, but also just the fact that like I've been in it this whole time and it's treated me so well and so poor at times, but it's treated me so well. And like, I've learned so much that I don't want to end feeling like, man, I just don't even want to think about it. I don't want to go. Like this put me in a position of, I was able to retire on my own terms, feeling grateful, thankful for what I accomplished. And it was weird because I did recognize that I was retiring at what could be like a peak part of my career, but that made it that much easier to like, now I'm just doing whatever. I'm like, don't have any second thoughts about it. That's the thing. It's like, I'd never had any second thoughts. It was just like, you know what? I'm ending feeling good. I'm ending feeling confident in myself and in what I accomplished. And I'm not afraid to talk about it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That it's amazing. And I remember we had this sweet Airbnb in Oregon, my family and I. Luke wasn't there, but after Luke had a good performance at the trials, my dad and I were just sitting on this deck by this beautiful river just talking, and first thing that came out of Dad's mouth was, he was like, he needs to shut it down. Just, and I looked at him and I was like, if he was smart, he would shut it down. If he was, and then it was just kind of like, is he smart or is he not smart?
Yeah, and
we don't know.
I feel like also the big thing was, forgot to mention that, is that like when I went, and I think it is like every Olympic year, it gives you that clarity of like, okay, like I think a lot of people can resonate with the fact that after an Olympic year, you kind of reassess and you're kind of like, okay, what needs to change? What's the goals coming up? All that. And when it ended, and whenever I had I had thought about retiring probably starting in like July, like early July. So not far after the Olympic trials, like mid-July or late July.
Your appendix out.
I would say like at the end of July or like early August, I was like having a really fun time doing a bunch of other stuff and like still staying in good shape and just like going and running. I was sending you videos of me running like 200 intervals with my dog and like,
right.
And none of that stuff. Well, it does apply to pole vault, but like I was running like 400s or 300s, just like getting my body in shape and like having a fun time. And
but you would not normally
I would not normally do that stuff, but it was fun.
Right,
and I was like, man, this is kind of fun to be able to do whatever I want and not have to think about like what's next.
Right.
And then whenever I would think about what's next, I was like, well, let me just like go through what I've done. Like 2-time state champion. I had the state record at one point, 7-time national champion, indoor outdoor national record for Division III. Most NCAA pole vault champion in any division, like 8-time or 9-time national championship qualifier for USATF, 2022 world championship, like made to the world championships, 2024 made it to the Olympic trials final, jumped 19 feet, jumped 570 like 10 times, and I started adding up like the things I had done, and I was like, what else would I want to do? Like I really was like, what is it? Like is it to make a certain bar more times? Is it to make another world team? And I was just, it sounds weird, but I just was like, if I made another world team, it'd be sick, but it was like, nothing will hit like the first one, And then I was like, if I make 19 again, that would be sick, but wouldn't probably hit like the first one did. Like I just was kind of like, I've kind of done everything I wanted to do, and not that I wouldn't be happy if I accomplished more, but I don't think it would make me any more happy than I am with the sport now. So I was just like, I think it's just might be time. And that was probably like beginning of August. And then it was like August, September, October, and then like we had our first workout here. And whenever I was in Ireland, I was talking to Amber. I was like, hey, we should find a meet that we can go to in like Spain or Italy or like, wherever, like Croatia or something like that. And then you can come with me, and then we could like do this whole thing, like where I'm jumping in a meet and we could hang out. And then I just started to recognize, I was like in my own head, I didn't tell this to Amber, but I was like, I think I just kind of want to do that stuff and not have my poles with me and not have to think about checking into my meet and not have to have Amber wait for me to be done with a meet so that we can go do other things. Like maybe I just want to go do that stuff with Amber. And that's why she was so surprised about the decision, because I called her like a week later whenever I was driving one time. She was like, I told her, I was like, hey, I think I'm going to retire. And she was like, you were just talking about going to meets in Europe though. And I was like, yeah, but I just want to go to Europe.
Yeah, I don't want to do the meet part.
I don't want to do the meet part. I just want to go to Europe with you. And it was, it's just like gradually I started to recognize that the things I wanted to do outweighed. I remember you and I talked about this probably 4 or 5 years ago, that you were like, eventually, when do you think you want to retire? And I was like, I think it'll just be whenever the stuff I want to do outside of pole vault outweighs me wanting to do it with pole vault, you know? And they got to that point.
Yeah. I mean, that being able to have the wherewithal to quit on top is insane. Like that is, I talked to you about how few people get to do what you did. It's like way, 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 way fewer that stop when they're at their best, and they're just like, all right, yeah, that's good. This is a great spot to stop.
Yeah, it was weird.
It's very, very rare.
I thank you for the big thing is later in my career, I recognized, thanks to you and other people too, but mainly you, about disconnecting way more from my identity from the sport. And it really allowed me to free up my mind and actually compete better, one. But then two, it was like, if I retire in the weirdest way, like no one really cares that much, like after, like, not that it's like it's initially it's like, wow, like that's crazy, like we really loved watching you vault, and but within a couple months, like, people move on. So it's not like I never wanted to I never like thought like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a big thing, like it's going to wreck the whole pole vault community and all this. Like, I'm sure some people may think that whenever they retire, but like I just was like, I actually initially was just like, I'm just gonna not post anything. I'm just gonna be done. Like, that way I don't have to be on social media anymore, and it'll be great. But obviously I wanted to do my due diligence of thanking people, and it was obviously a very important thing for me to announce that I was retiring. And I know that people do care. I'm not saying that people don't care. I'm just saying that it's easy to get caught up thinking that it's the reason you got to keep going is because people need you to keep going. And in reality, people don't care that much. They just want to see somebody pole vault high. Yeah. And so if you don't want to pole vault high anymore, they want to see somebody having fun pole vaulting high. That's what brings people to a pole vault meet, is having fun pole vaulting high, going crazy, and that stuff's so fun. But I just got to the point where I was like, I'd rather go and board slide a down rail at a skate park than go and get prepared for a track meet, you know?
And that's the thing, is that people, if you don't, like, I went through the process, the whole thing too, where I was just completely connected to the pole vault, where it was just like the pole vault was who I was, and I just wasn't able to separate those things. And it is harsh to say, but like, at the end, like, nobody cares. Like people care, but like,
they really just care that they want you to be happy.
They want you to be happy, yeah.
And do what you want to do.
I remember actually a good thing that kind of was similar to that was whenever I quit my job, whenever I quit teaching. I remember being like, oh yeah, like in my head, I'm like, yeah, they're really gonna get it this time. Like, I'm gonna walk in there and I'm gonna tell them I quit. And I remember telling my buddy, like, hey, I'm going to go do it right now. It was in the middle of the day. And I went in there, and I wasn't like an a-hole or anything, but I like walked in and I was just like, hey, what's going on? You know, in my principal's office. And I was like, I just want to let you know that I'm going to resign. And I resigned at the end of the year. And she was like,
sounds good.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. When are you going to be resigning? And I was like, oh my gosh, like,
it's
it just
business,
makes you
baby.
realize that like everything's going to continue to go on. So you better like learn how to, you know, acquire other skills, you know, while you're still pole vaulting, and like have other areas of your life that mean a lot to you while you're still pole vaulting. And I'm very grateful that we were blessed with the opportunity to open Rise, because very early on, I didn't really do it on purpose, but I just started to see like, hey, like Luke is pole vaulting now, and he wants to continue to pole vault, and he's very, very invested in pole vaulting. But I've seen a lot of elite pole vaulters go down like the couch surfing route, where they just couch surf around Europe for 10 years, and then they get done and they're 30 years old or 35 years old, and they're like, well, I don't have any connections outside of pole vaulting. I don't have any skills outside of pole vaulting. I don't have anything else like really going for me outside of this. And you can get to a really tough spot. So the cool part is that you were able to continue to pursue your passion for pole vaulting and do that, but you were also building a career at the same time, which is pretty sweet.
I know. You know. Yeah, it's been seamless too. Like, like I said, I never want to end on a bad note. So that way I can enter in now, and it's kind of like how I would enter into my workouts, where it's like, okay, when I'm here, I'm pole vault focused, and whenever I leave, I'm doing other things. now it's the same thing, but it's just whenever it comes to coaching, it's like, all right, now when I'm here, I can lock into coaching and I don't have to, have pole vault on my mind in some capacity for the entire day.
Mm-hmm.
It's been kind of nice.
Yeah. So that was another thing that I was going to ask is, what are you so happy that you won't ever have to do again?
That's a good question. I would say the biggest thing is like I enjoyed the travel of pole vaulting. Like it is fun to like be in the new destination is fun, but the actual getting on a plane, sitting, delays, poles, people, what's in the bag? Dude, I don't know why that like irks me so bad, but like when you get it 50 times in the airport while you're trying not to hit people and they're like, what's in the bag? I'm just like, dude, not today. That part of it, the hecticness, there's enjoyment of that though, or else I wouldn't have like done it. But
Yeah. There's
some weird enjoyment of that, but that part is I'm happy to not deal with anymore. That's the big thing. The actual act of traveling, but I would say the other stuff is just like having to be so extremely regimented about fueling my body and workout wise. Like, so there was no like, oh, I normally work out at 12 today. I slept in a little too much. I'm just going to bump that until after I'm done coaching or something like that. That none of that like occurred. It was like, you're working out. I work out at noon every day, jump at noon, lift at noon, squat at noon, sprint at noon. Like everything was exactly at the same time. So I had the right amount of recovery between every workout, fueling, making sure I had a half gallon of water before I got to Rise to make sure that I was fueled up enough, make sure I had breakfast, and then lunch and dinner had to be packed for me coming to Rise.
Right.
And then like making sure you have the right amount of protein and like just actually thinking about all that stuff. There's a lot more into that than people realize. And it's not like I was some extremely like, it's not like I just ate chicken, rice, and vegetables every day, but it was like
It's
making sure
kind of close.
Kind of close to it. Yeah. And like without me realizing, it's just like, okay, you're eating the exact same. And I do that still now just because I think it's healthy to kind of have a regimented way of eating, but it's not so much where it's like I need to have a good amount of like protein every single time. I need to make sure that like, so last week I was sick. And then it's like, I was thinking about that last week, like, okay, well, whenever I was sick, when I vaulted, my mind instantly went to when's my next meet, when's my next vault workout, when's my next sprint day and lift day, because those ones, if I do those too soon, I could elongate this sickness. And I need to make sure I'm like fueling properly to get rid of the sickness as quick as I can. Like there's so much stuff that goes into that.
It's like a blanket over your entire life.
Yeah. And so now it's like a lot of that stuff I'm able to just be like, okay, I was sick. I'm just going to not do much until I get healthy again.
Just going to rest.
Like that's what I,
right.
And which at some point that's probably the smart move in pole vault. But whenever you're preparing for big stuff and you need to maintain your strength and power and speed and stuff, it's at some point you got to be super regimented with like locking in as early as you can after that sickness and like preparing and prepping for that. And that's been really nice to not have to like be so locked into that stuff.
And also like the panic too. Like,
yeah, that's kind of what I'm talking about.
The panic of just like, oh my gosh, I feel a little weird.
Well, it was like, it's the week before Reno. Like last year it would have been like, oh, it's the week before Reno and I'm sick. And
I still feel like that with with Reno now though,
because
we have so many people counting on us
Yeah.
to be there.
But like competition wise, I would think like, oh gosh, I'm sick. I've got a meet coming up. And it's not like I would always go into a panic. I would never be frantic like that. But in my head, I would think like, well, last year, like I explained the whole flu stuff. It was like, well, crap, I got the flu right after Reno. That I guess cancels my next couple meets.
Right.
And then I got the flu again, and it was like, well, we're going to jump at U.S. indoors, so like we just kind of got to figure this out. And at that last year, it was like we just had to give in because I was just sick so much for some reason. But
or like yesterday, I was at the Museum of Science and Industry with my kids, and like walking around all day.
Oh yeah.
And it would just be like, if you're like an athlete and a vaulter and you're really into it, like maybe it's bad, but like in the back of your head, you're like, man, I've been on my feet for like 6 hours, like 7 hours, and then you start, and then it just occupies this huge space in your mind where it's just like, man, I just wish that I didn't have to do that all the time. And I think that, so the time that you retire is whenever like the things you want to do outweigh the pole vaulting, or you just get so tired of dealing with that space being occupied in your mind that you just can't take it anymore. And you're just like, all right, well, I've dealt with that for 20 years and now I'm done.
Now I'm going to do whatever. Yeah, that's what's been, I was telling you the other day, I spent so much time outside lately. And like last year, it's good to spend time outside, but in the Midwest, if you're spending too much time out in 20-degree weather, you're going to end up getting sick probably. And so I wouldn't spend as much time outside if I was preparing for pole vaulting. But now I don't really have that restriction. So it is what it is.
And then, so we can circle back to that one. What will you miss the most, do you think?
Oh, what will I miss the most? That's two things. One is like it definitely will be weird being at meets, or like, okay, like I'm not going to be going to a million meets, but I guess like going to Reno, and there's nothing like putting on, like for me, like a really heavy album and getting prepared for the actual meet. So like last year, like throwing on Polaris, like album front to back, and just warming up and just being by myself for a little bit and enjoying, like I've got a pressure on myself from myself, and we've got a bunch of Rise kids here. We got people who know me now. Like that feeling of just that swagger of just walking around and being like, I'm one of the dudes, like who's going to be out there jumping real high. Like
maybe you shouldn't.
That's that part of it is like, that's the addicting part. It's just like, man, that is so much fun. And like listening to the music and getting into that like warrior mindset of just like, I'm about to go do it.
And that feeling that you're talking about, unfortunately, the older you get, is harder to come by, man.
I know.
It's just really hard to come by. This is a depressing question, but
last part I was going to say is just the definitely the people too. Like I think I'm gonna miss them in the sense that I'm not gonna see them all the time. I'm still friends with them and still gonna be seeing them every once in a while. But like the Trey Oates and Garrett Starkey, and Nate Hyatt and all the Arizona crew, Nate Richards and Cole Walsh and Audie and all the Luna, all those people. The big thing is that like I jumped. A lot of people wondered why I jumped in so many meets out west. Like you're in California every weekend, you're in Arizona every other weekend. It's because, the big reason is because the weather sucks in the Midwest. Like that's the main thing, is that I unfortunately, this is a woe is me thing, but I don't live in a place where I can just like go and take a 4-hour drive and have different weather or nice weather, or just live in an area that has nice weather all the time. It's just unpredictable. So it was never something I was willing to like, hey, let me go to this small meet where I'm the only jumper and I win by 5 feet on my opening bar. Like that's just not enjoyable to me. That would have been the death of my career. Like I would have just fully been done if that was the case, if I kept doing that. Yeah. But going to a place which was usually Chula Vista or Arizona State or University of Arizona was like, or AZPVA, where I knew there was familiar faces, but also really good competition every single time. Like a guarantee that I would have at least one or two people that were like competitive with me and could push me and I could push them. And that is something that I will miss, is just being able to know that like I'm rolling up to a meet with a bunch of familiar faces. We're all dapping each other up and, asking how everything's been and hanging out at somebody's house afterwards. Like that stuff was really cool. But I don't think that's gone. I think that it's just, it'll be a different realm. Thankfully we have Rise, and in Arizona they have clubs down there that we're close with, and we communicate with them all the time. So it's like a little bit different, but,
see them this weekend.
Yeah, see him
Ever,
this
you know?
week. See him this weekend, and plus side is Colby's from Arizona, so like if there ever
Right.
was an opportunity where it's like, hey, they're having some people out there or something. I also was at Nate's wedding in October, so that was really cool. That was the last time I saw them while I was still technically not a retired vaulter. So
Yeah, that's wild. I forgot what I was going to say. Do you remember what I was going to?
you just said this is a small question, but
Oh, okay. So we were talking about like that vibe that you get like before a meet and all of that stuff. And I mean, it's just a fact of life that it's just harder to recreate that. Like, because, and this is, I hesitated to even put this down. And I, even on my notes, I wrote ha 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 at the end of it because, so it's like, it's very likely, I don't even know if I want to tell you this. It's very likely that you will never be as good at anything
I know.
as you were at pole vaulting.
I know that's hey, that's true though. If any of you guys are fans of like Jason Kelsey, like the NFL, Jason Kelsey, Travis Kelsey, who's dating Taylor Swift, his brother,
Yeah.
the center with the big beard.
Oh, yeah.
He retired, and he seems like a really cool dude, but I watched his whole retirement speech. It was like 40 minutes long or something. I watched the whole thing, and he's a very emotional guy, and I'm like that too, like where if I start talking about something, I could start crying.
Mm-hmm.
But he said the craziest thing is that I don't know what I'm going to do or how it's going to be not being one of the best in the world at the thing that I do. So like the thing that he did was he played in the NFL. He was a center, and he was like, it's going to be weird retiring, and no matter what he does, he very likely will not be one of the best in the world at that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I am nowhere near one of the best in the world at skateboarding. You know what I mean?
Right.
And like nowhere near one of the best in the world at drumming or playing the guitar or producing music, like any of that stuff. And I have a lot of hobbies. But yeah, that's the thing is that I do think that throughout time, like coaching, I'm a good coach, but I'm not looking for a thing to be one of the best in the world at. I kind of had my time and paid my dues. That's the thing, and that's the freedom I have is being able to now live a life that I don't have to have such crazy high expectations of myself, and I can just live it freely and just be like, hey, you know what? I'm learning how to do this trick on a skateboard or learning how to play this rhythm on the drums, and it's taken me way longer than it should somebody else, but like find joy in that. Like find joy in the fact that it's like, man, this is like learning a whole new thing again,
Yeah,
being okay with it.
In the level system that Dad created, it is based. Our whole system at Rise is how we instruct is based on that, around that level system. The final level is to give back and to, help somebody else learn how to do it. And that, like, I know for sure that you will be better at helping people get better at pole vaulting and running this business with me, and I know for sure that you will be better at that. Like I'm very certain about that.
Well, I appreciate it.
But it doesn't hit the same as there's just a doing something like I think that Rise could have a huge impact on the sport, huge positive impact on the sport. I feel like we could do something very, very special. We'll say that could be one of the best things out there in the pole vaulting world. But that, like, having that sort of success, it's not as acute.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's not as like, boom.
The bar is still up.
I did it.
Yeah, it's not
You know
like,
what I'm
the
saying?
bar is still up. It's always a question of like, is the bar up?
I know. Like
There's like
in
a red
order
and a
for
white
me to be
flag,
able to
like, we don't
see if
know.
we're having success at Rise, I literally have to sit down and like go back and be like, okay, well, 4 years ago we were here and now we're here. And then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we're doing better.
Yeah.
Instead of like the music cranking, you run down the runway, your new personal best, and you smoke over it, and the whole crowd goes wild.
Yeah,
Like, that is so much more like acute and right there and in your face. And that's, I guess, what I'm saying. Like, I don't know, like, there may never be another thing like that you really get to experience, you know?
Yeah.
Which the success in this stuff is amazing, and it's so much fun and challenging. It's just as challenging.
Oh, yeah.
Probably more challenging. But it just hits different. It's weird.
Definitely hits different.
Yeah.
The last two, my first meet of last year and my last meet of last year were like my two favorite meets, which is kind of cool. Reno, jumped 572, and it was like they put Aliens Are Ghosts by the Suicide Boys on, and I was just feeling like I was feeling myself and went crazy after I'd made it. And what's awesome. Crazy, and like this can get very mind-blowing, but like the more I think about it, is like I never knew that was my last clearance at Reno. You know what I mean? Like I never knew that was my last big, like, holy cow, this is it. Like I would have just been like, oh, I'll be back next year, you know? Right. But like after, I think that's why I'm so thankful that I retired the way that I did, and it just kind of came to that decision, because I wouldn't have wanted to know that, you know? I wouldn't have wanted to know heading into Reno, like, this is the last one, I better make it good. You know?
that sounds stressful.
And then
to me,
like
man.
the Olympic trials, it was like, I had no idea that my last meet, you and your wife and kids, all my nieces and nephews, my on Jake's side and on Josh's side, and my wife and Paul Skubik, my supporter, and like my mom and dad and all these people, I would have never thought that was my last meet. But like how crazy, like it's just so, it's like serendipitous that it was like made the finals on a third attempt where I bobbled the bar, and then got into the finals and was like just elated, like not just to be out there, but I just remember being like, this is so cool. Like the Olympic trials, this is sweet. Like we're all 12 or whatever of us are out here competing for a spot for the Olympics. And you only have to beat 9 of them.
Right.
Like it was a weird like thing to be like, if you beat 9 people, you go to the Olympics. And so it's just kind of like you're checking people off kind of like as they get out. But it was a really cool thing, and like having left and retired, knowing that like that was my last moment, it's just a cool thing. Like, and back to what you're saying about like nothing will match the feeling of that Reno clearance, or the feeling of like jumping and like making a bar and looking over and seeing like my nieces in the crowd, like, oh, let's go Luke, cool. Uncle Luke. But that's okay.
Right.
You know? That's cool.
What was the lowest time that you can remember, and how did you get through it?
I have 2 moments specifically that I remember. Well, I would say 3. There's like obviously been times that I wish if I could go back, like I never would change anything, but if I could go back, like the ways that certain times that I like acted like an idiot, like after performing bad, or like being frustrated at like dad or something like that. And I tell him that all the time, that I'm like, now that I'm 29, I understand every single thing you were saying. Like I totally get what you're saying.
About 15 years too late.
Yeah, and it's just like when you're acting a fool, and you know, we are always, a lot of people might be surprised by that, but it was mainly acting a fool when we're at practice, not around other people, because our parents would be real pissed if we acted a fool. You know, not at, you know, around other people. But there were a couple times that I, you know, just was ungrateful and not nice and things like that. So those periods of times, I wish that I didn't act that way. But everybody goes through struggles, and that's why when I see a kid getting frustrated, it's like, I've been there, dude. Come here. Like, let me talk you through this. Yeah. But the main 2 like pole vaulting moments was, there was a time where I was vaulting at Rise, and it was like a week or 2 after COVID had hit, and I was just vaulting at the Rise facility by myself alone, and every single meet that I had scheduled got canceled. And this was my first full year. This was supposed to be my first full season outside of college. So I had like 2019, I did an indoor at North Central, and then outdoors was by myself, like post-collegiate, unattached. 2020 was supposed to be like first indoor season by my, unattached, first outdoor season. It was going to be a fun time. And I think we had like Reno, and then after that it was kind of like we had like Reno and then indoor USAs, and then COVID shut everything down. And I was at Rise one day and I was like, ran down the runway on a 490, got put on the front bun. My motivation was just so depleted. It was like 490, landed on the front bun, went to a smaller 490, like hardly made it into the pit, then went to a 15.6. And this is all from like a 7 left, which was my full at the time. Like barely made it into the pit, then went to a 15-footer and like planted and like came down on the bungee. And Mom was in there when she was cleaning. Remember when she would clean our old facility? And
I bet that was great.
She just was like, you'll figure it out or something. Like tried to say something nice, and I was like, honestly, I just don't even know if I could do this anymore. Like I was just pouting, but I just remember being like, I'm just kind of tired of this. I didn't actually want to be done vaulting at that time, but then the second time was indoors. The biggest moment was at Reno, 2021 Reno.
Ooh.
I made 520 on like a third attempt on the B pit and got like last place on the B pit. And I was just like, dude, it was at the point where I was 25, I think, and 25 or 26. And I was just like, is this like a sign that I just need to kind of pack it up? Like I'm trying everything. I'm trying to listen. I'm trying different pole sizes. I've basically tried everything. And my Achilles was bothering me so bad. And I got off because I was taking off under and like stomping my last step. But that stuff I didn't recognize. And then whenever I went over to you and Dad, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to be done for the indoor season. And Dad was just like, what? Like, just go, like I was just like pouting and talking through all that. But then when we got back was whenever Dad and I talked and you and Dad talked. And that's whenever we like made the switch of like, Dad was like, hey, I think Luke needs a change of something. And if he's not even listening to himself at this point, like I wasn't even listening to myself. I was just like, I don't even know what to do. I'm just trying to pole vault and hoping that I jump high. Mm-hmm. And then eventually you came in, and that was a point where you had told me, which kicked me into the right gear. Hopefully the listeners don't take this in the wrong way, but Jake was just like, this is your last resort. Mm-hmm. Like this is your last chance. So if you want to dial it in and like listen and actually do this thing, I'm willing to do it with you. But the only way is if you like actually are able to listen and actually able to like stick to a plan that I set out and like we actually go through and do things. And if you're not willing to do that, then that's fine. Just retire. Mm-hmm. And then whenever you like said that, I was like, oh, like I got like a dagger in the heart, and I was like, hold up. It's actually here. Like if I don't do it, I'm actually done.
Right.
And then it was like a big wake up call to be like, okay, I may not have a whole bunch of time left, but with the time that I have left, I'm going to go all in. And I remember you just saying, if it doesn't work, guess what? You tried, and then you could just be done.
Yeah.
And you could just retire. But if it does work, then it worked. But you're like, if you never try it and you never just try to actually stick to something for a long period of time, you'll never know if you would have been able to do something beyond what you've done, and you'd be able to end your career the way that I feel now,
I remember that. And I remember the reason that I said that was because I didn't have the time to deal with the excess stuff that comes with training an elite vaulter. Yep. Like, especially like an older elite vaulter. Like I was like, I just got through COVID. Like we opened up Rise and I signed that lease 5 months before COVID hit. Mm-hmm. We got fully shut down. All that stuff happened. I was just trying to just scrap and try to figure out how this thing was going to survive, basically.
Well, and Rise was started not by a donation, not by having multiple people with second jobs. It was
a $50
fully
check
Jake. Yeah, it was a $50 check
that turned in and then just kept
that
rolling it back
snowballed.
in.
And Jake had a gym teacher salary to be working off of, which obviously, as you guys know, is not like a crazy high salary. So like,
No.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. Like $40,000 a year.
Yeah.
Take home like 37. So bad. Didn't have a lot to cover though, so that's good. But the thing is I was doing that, and I remember being on the plane home from. Well, first of all, I remember watching you and just being like, yeah, he just doesn't look. I think I told Dad, I was like, he just doesn't look good. Like there's just no way around it. He just doesn't look good. He doesn't look strong. He doesn't look fast. The poles just look like a noodles. You know, like I was like, he's lucky if he's gonna make 520 today. Like it's just not working. Something is not working. I remember on the plane thinking to myself, like, I should probably offer to do something about it. And
520 is 17 feet roughly.
Yeah.
And my PR at the end of my career is 19. So that was like a really bad
it's like 2 feet
day.
low. Yeah. And I just remember just being like, hey man, like I'll do this, but I can't deal with all the extra stuff. Like, so it's either you're going to listen to this 100% or it's just not going to work, you know, like, and that's fine if it doesn't, like, but, you know, I think you still got more left in you, you know.
That was
Turned out
definitely
to
the
be
scariest moment. Like that was the first time that I had ever I never wanted I'm pretty sure I made Dad tell me like I need you to tell me that Jake is going to coach me, because I was like, I don't have the ability to tell you.
It was like
you're not going to coach me.
It was a weird triangle
Yeah.
because I was like, should I tell Dad that I want to coach Luke?
Yeah.
And then you were like, should I tell Dad that I want Jake to coach me because Dad's going to kill me?
Yeah.
Dad might
But then
kill me.
in the grand scheme of things, he wanted to be done too.
He wanted to
so
be
he was
done.
like,
Yeah,
he
yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to be, it just kind of worked out perfectly.
That
We've
was
talked about this a
God's
lot, but
blessing,
it's
yeah.
like, it just so happened that my dad retired from teaching around that same time. And it's like, that dude's been coaching
Oh, man.
so much, like beyond the hours you can imagine, since he was like my age, like 29 or something, or 30.
Even before that.
And even before that. And so then whenever he retired from teaching, and it was like he got a little bit of time to then spend with my mom, and then there's, you know, it was just like, I wanted him to be done as well. Like I
He
wanted
was
him to
happy.
have the grace of being able to be like, enjoy the rest of your life not having to be surrounded by pole vault so much.
And another incredible blessing from that was that he got to enjoy the most prominent success in your career from the perspective of a dad,
Yeah, that's pretty sick.
which is pretty sick.
That is really cool when
Yeah.
you think about it like
So
that.
he did all the hard work,
Yeah.
the really, really hard work. But it was really cool because he got to go to the trials and watch his son compete in the trials.
Yeah.
And not have to, you know, feel like I did, where it was just like, oh man,
Gotta be locked in
I hope Luke does this, and what about this situation? So he was just able to watch it as a dad, and man, what a great gift. So it ended up working out really, really well
Mhm.
for that. I have a couple other things written down here. If you were to pin down just like one moment that you would rank as your top moment from your career, what do you think it would be?
I keep choosing multiples, but I'm going to have to keep rolling with multiples. I'll choose 3.
Dang, I said
That's
one.
okay. If I had to choose one pinpointed moment that was like, holy crap, it would be, it was in 2021, or 2022. So after the Reno situation, you started coaching me. And then basically it was like, it seemed like I was relearning a couple things, relearning how to do certain things technically different. So learning how to, big thing was like my head throw. That's always been a thing in my vault, but it proved to be a negative thing. I know some people can get away with it because they are able to kind of recover the head as they're extending, but I was always somebody who, like, if I threw my head, it's never coming back, and it's like a big detriment to my jump. So that, taking off a little further out, all those little things, running a 9 left instead of a 7 left, and being able to go to a meet having not run 9 and run 9 there, like, because we didn't have a facility long enough for me to run my approach. But the big thing was I went to the not the Windy City Pole Vault Summit, but some track meet at Gately, which is like a big bank track in Chicago. It's kind of a new track. And University of Wisconsin always puts on a meet there. They come down to Chicago. And what happened was, since 2016, my PR indoors was 5:52. So that's like 18:1 and a quarter. And since that was 2016. Yeah. And so 6 years later, 6 years, I went to the Gately track, and on my 3rd attempt on a pole I had never been on a grip I had never gripped, running 9 lefts, after only a month of you and I working together, I jumped 5:56. And it was my first indoor PR in 6 years. And it was like, very few times throughout that 6-year period did I jump 18 feet even. So I went, and I jumped that, full committed to the jump, actually smoked it pretty good, like made it by quite a bit. And I like let out the loudest, like,
cool video
curling scream ever. And I just like didn't even know what to do. Like, I was so confused, but also like that was my last jump, last meet, 3rd attempt, opportunity to qualify for that indoor USA's, which was a week or two after. And so I qualified because I jumped 56, and some people were at 5:55, and so I qualified on the last day, last attempt, bigger pole, all that stuff. And that moment was basically the moment that I realized, like, I could do it. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, wait, I could actually do this thing again. Like, I full on believe now that I can be a good pole vaulter, and I can pole vault high, and I have the ability to like be clutch again, and to like do cool things in the elite, not just like the average pole vault world, but in the elite pole vault world. Like, I can do things, and I can go to these meets still. And after that meet, I went in the car, and Amber was with me at that meet, and I just like sat in the car and cried for like 15 minutes. And it was just like, and Amber was probably crying too. Like, we just hugged, and I was just like, I just remember repeating, I did it a bunch of times, like how it's finally come to fruition, and I can actually do, like, I'm the person that I've been building up to be for a really long time, and it finally happened.
Yeah.
And even though it was only, and putting in perspective, it's funny because that's 5:56, and now I've jumped 19 feet, and like I've done a whole lot of things since then. But it was a very big, monumental day for me that I'll always remember. And that's like the big, huge moment that I remember being like, this is it. Like, I've got it now.
You had something to believe in again.
Yeah.
Yeah. That.
And when you think about how long, like, I was actually talking to a couple of the Rise athletes the other day who are going through struggles, and like how long 6 years is. Like,
dude,
it was crazy because it would always, every year, like, the indoor season would go and it would pass, and it would go and it would pass. And I know that people will be like, yeah, well, all-time PR is what matters. Regardless, my all-time PR was 4.5 years prior to that. So it didn't, either way, it was a long time.
Right.
But my all-time PR at that time was 560 from 4.5 years prior. And then I ended up breaking that at the first meet outdoors. And that was a little more expected. That's the thing, is like, it was just a bit more expected that I was going to do that. So the next ones were pretty sick, but they were a little bit more expected. as I was jumping better, and this one was a bit more of a surprise. And yeah, it was just it was a really cool moment.
Cool.
I'll remember it forever. But and then I was gonna say, like, the World Championships was such like a blur almost. Like, qualifying for that, I was just like,
that was such a weird.
I would say that's another crazy moment. The one at Gately was more of an emotional, like, monumental moment for my career in pole vaulting, where I was like, let's go. I'm doing it again. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'll build off of that really quick. But we went to the Indoor USA Championships. And I don't know if I've told this story on the podcast, but we went to the Indoor USA Championships, and you weren't able to make it out, but it was in Spokane, Washington.
Spokane,
yeah.
Okay.
And Mom and Dad were there, and it was really weird because it was Dad's first meet that he had gone to, not as the coach. And so I respect Dad for this, but he went, and I was like, hey, so I have a coach's pass. And he was just like, and I was just like, and I'm just offering it to you if you want to take. It was like a weird situation with Dad and I. And he was like, honestly, you and Jake are doing a great job with what you're doing, and I would rather not, like, interfere with what you guys are doing, and just want to watch you as your dad. Like you said, like, I just want to be able to sit back and watch you as your dad. But heading into that meet, I had been jumping really well, obviously. I jumped that PR, but I was slowly getting to the point of moving through my poles. And Jake, you were like, so unfortunately, or fortunately, you qualified for the U.S. Championships. Unfortunately, I'm not willing enough to completely change your pole size, and break what we've already, like, been, that's the beginning of what we're doing. Like, that's a month into us being coach and athlete, having that situation going on. So, like, being locked in is really important, and making sure I'm sticking to the plan is, like, very, very crucial. So when we were headed out, you were like, hey, there's a unfortunately high possibility that you could no height.
Right.
And he was like, he's like, you can't be scared to talk about that. And that actually changed a lot of my perspective too. You can't be scared to say that there's a possibility you can no height. There's a possibility you could make one bar. There's a possibility. Because if you're scared to talk about it, you know that that's a fear that you have. It's like, you shouldn't be afraid to no height. You got to be able to go into a meet knowing that's a possibility, or why you pole vault. And I went to the meet, but you were like, I don't want you to send me a video of you not executing the plan that we have established of, like, what you're trying to work on. And you were like, if you send me videos of you making a bar and it looks all sloppy and it's not something that we're trying to work on, like, that's not building along the process of what we're trying to accomplish. So just, if you feel yourself moving through, like, just keep moving and just keep finishing the jump like you should. And you were like, unless it gets to a situation where something weird is going on and you just need to kind of, like, get over the bar. But I ended up no heighting at that meet and sent you all the videos, and the one text you sent back was, that's the best vault day of your entire life.
It was.
And I was like, what? And I remember going into the stands and kind of pouting a little bit with Mom and Dad, and just kind of being like a little mopey, like, hey, you did great. Mom and Dad and Amber just kind of like, hey, you did great. Like, and Dad just saying, hey, sorry you didn't make anything. I feel for you. But when we were walking out, I do remember Mom saying something like, you should really be proud of what you're here and you made it. And I just said, like, there's a lot of people out there that I could jump higher than at this point. Like, I'm a lot better vaulter than I once was. Like, I can go and I can, beat a lot of people. Not that that's my only goal in pole vault, is to beat people, but Mom was like, and you will.
Yeah.
And then what's crazy is that outdoor season was where I got second at the second and went to the World Championships.
Yeah.
So it's, like, crazy how there was a lot happening in that year, and it was a very monumental year for me, like a big change.
When I got those videos of you no hiding, that was whenever I was like, all right, he's bought in fully. Because if you're willing to do that, it's like, all right, you're willing to literally blow through all your poles and no height. It's like, all right, he's fully bought in. But the biggest thing is whenever I saw those videos, I was like, all right, now something really cool is going to happen now.
Yeah.
Like, because I could just see it. It's like whenever you're working with a kid and you're like, you watch them do a jump and you're like, oh my gosh, that was it. And they're like, what are you talking about? And it's like, I know what that's going to look like in a month.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to look real nice and you're going to really like it. That's the exact same feeling that I got when I got those videos. Is I was like, oh man, yeah, he's going to go high. He's going to go a lot higher than he's ever gone. This is going to be great.
Yeah, and then when we returned back to the workout, the first workout back, so the opening bar at that meet was like 550 or 551, and we put a bungee up at 550, and I made it 4 times in a row. The first workout back, because we went to the bigger poles.
Right.
But it just needed to be done. Like, it needed to be solidified that it was like, this is the move. Because if we did it prematurely, there's a chance that it
blows
occurred.
up all the stuff that we just worked on. You know, and we didn't want that to happen. How did you, throughout your career, keep yourself from like falling prey to the comparison trap?
I didn't a lot of the time, unfortunately, but later in my career I did. I would say early in my career I did. I didn't fall into that trap. Midway I did, and then later in my career I also didn't. I think whenever you're naive and you're young, you're young enough in the event. Now, again, whenever I was a senior in high school, I'd already been vaulting for like 10 years. So like,
right.
Take that into perspective as far as being young in the event. But I think also I did grow up in the era of social media, but I grew up where it was beginning when I was a sophomore in high school. So like not Snapchat, Instagram, which is the big one. Like, as far as a pole vault's, in my opinion, a pole vault's nemesis at times.
Right.
Could be just scrolling on people that you're competing with's page just to see how good they are. Like, that's a nemesis, in my opinion, is like the Instagram comparison. But it came out, or I got it at least, whenever I was a sophomore. So it was like, and if any of you guys have seen like a millennials posts on Instagram from back when they were like 2012, 2013, they were just the most random things. Like just like a picture of a bike with no reference of what the bike does or what, it was just random.
Bike.
Yeah, this is literally like, this is my bike. I did have one like that. But
that's awesome.
So like freshman or sophomore, junior, senior year, it was kind of like, it's just kind of there. People are using it a little bit, but there wasn't as much like, hey, Luke is posting this, and then who are like Tommy Dial and Devin King and like Paulo Benavides and Audie. Those are just like the vaulters I remember jumping with in high school. It wasn't like I was looking around, like it was just newer. So it wasn't like something where it was like, oh, I know what I'm going to do today. I'm going to go check out what this vaulter's doing on their page and see how their progress is. Because people just didn't post vaults as much either. It was kind of like, hey, I pole vault. Here's a video of me pole vaulting. And then a couple months go by and you post another video of you vaulting. It wasn't like consistent, I am Luke Winder, the pole vaulter. Here are all of my posts that are all pole vault.
Right.
Yeah. And so it was easier to be away from that whenever I was in high school, I think. But the problem did start to arise in college whenever that became a bigger thing. I'm not naming any names, but there was the early pole vault influencers that would start to make posts about, and you could tell that the posts were more aimed at trying to get likes and more,
create a following
and stuff. Not that that's a bad thing. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. But for me, it wasn't a great thing to see all the time, to be able to say, hey, for example, like also I grew up, rest in peace, but Sean Barber was like the dude when I was in college. And Sean Barber gripped like 17.6. So you're constantly looking at the dude,
right,
who's jumps on 540 poles or whatever, and and then you got the end of the spectrum of Sam Kendricks, who was also the guy, and so you're like bouncing between, I need to grip 16.6 and I need to grip 15.
Right.
And so like all times, whoever you're looking at, it's like, what am I supposed to do? And so in college and early post-collegiate, it was difficult to not constantly be thinking about like, what do I need to do, or have a great vault workout. And I explain this to people all the time. Is like, you have a great vault workout. Let me post up my vault workout. That's sick. And then right after you post it, another post comes up of one of your competitors who had a slightly better vault workout than you did.
Yep.
And then you're like, dang, dude, I made a 540 bungee today. And this person just made a 550 bungee. And now I feel like I want to delete my post because I feel like worthless.
I went through that with YouTube. So YouTube, my timeline might be off, but nobody posted anything on Instagram or Facebook whenever I was younger. Because basically when I was coming up, it was like Facebook had basically been the only thing.
It was
that
like
was the
MySpace.
Well, MySpace and then Facebook. But I remember doing that with YouTube and just being like, oh man, like in order to be that good, I've got to do what this guy does. That's crazy. And one of them, I enjoyed these videos, so I'm not throwing any shade at all. But I
know exactly what I think.
What
I know
are you
what
gonna
you're
say?
The pole vault summit ones. Oh no, never mind.
No,
When people used to make like, I'm going to the pole vault summit, are you? And it would be like them lifting and vaulting and stuff like that.
No, that's pretty funny.
If you remember that comment.
I think I remember that. No, the Sam Kendrick's jumping 18 feet a million times in like a half an hour or something. And then I remember just being like, because this was at the end of my career, and I was like, there's no way that I could jump 18. I don't even know if I've ever jumped 18 in practice.
Think about this. So Sam Kendrick's, I think the challenge was, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but I binged those videos all the time.
I love the videos.
It's a sick video.
But it made me feel
like crap. Thanks,
very
Sam.
disheartened.
But even worse is like Sam had like a 550 or 555 challenge of like, I'll make it 5 times in a half hour. And then while I'm in college and like a senior in college, like trying my best to jump 18, one time that year, or 2 times or 3 times the whole year, a 16-year-old in Louisiana posts a video of him clearing 18 feet 10 times
Goodness gracious.
in a half hour over a bar. It's the name of Mondo Duplantis.
Yeah.
And I remember like seeing the video and being like, this is the sickest video ever. Like I loved watching it and being like, this is so cool to see this dude jumping. He was like 16 or 17 or something. And I just remember being like, dude, I'm just trying to make it 1 time in a year.
I know,
but
man.
like that's the comparison trap it's a very difficult thing. But as I got older, I just like I said, like you started to help me disconnect my identity from it. And so it started to be a lot less like, I didn't really care when I would see people vaulting. Like I would be happy for them, but I didn't really think like, oh, this person jumped 19.6 today. Looks like I suck or something. But I also would stay away from it a lot more. I didn't go on Instagram. I don't go on Instagram hardly at all anymore. But during my last 3 years of competing, I also would not go on Instagram very much at all. And so if you guys have noticed, if you DM me and I don't get back to you very quick, it's because of that.
Andy doesn't like you.
And I don't like you. No, Jake just kind of realized that was a thing that I struggled with, was just like not being able to let go of the competitiveness, which is not a bad thing. That's why that's why I was a good pole vaulter. But if you're constantly having your heart rate up and constantly in adrenaline mode, when you get into practice, you're not in adrenaline mode. You're not like as hyped up as you need to be, and you're not as focused on what Luke Winder needs to accomplish that day. So it was more like, save that energy, just disconnect from that as much as you can completely. And I would post and then I would ghost. And that was like our thing, is I would post and ghost, and then I would just come into my workout, and if people commented or liked or whatever, I would see it at some point, but it would be the next time I post something, and it was just something that really helped me kind of stay locked into what I was doing and try to just get rid of distractions. But that was only really the last like 3 or 4 years. But the years in between like high school and that was, I definitely did compare myself quite a bit. And that's something that I am happy I learned, because I wouldn't be able to have retired as thankfully and as like happily as I do now.
Mm-hmm.
Because imagine if you like are about to retire and then you see these other guys jumping high and you are so competitive that you just can't get out of your head and you just want to keep going so you could show them what's up. Like, I didn't want to be in that mode, you know?
And also, like, you start getting older and you're like, man, I don't want to get whooped by like an 18-year-old.
Yeah, that too.
That you don't want to get to that spot. There was two things that I thought about during that, and we'll wrap up here in just a few minutes. But number one was, dang it, I forgot. All right, I'll just remember the one that I did. All right, so what you can do if you're not careful as you go on in your pole vaulting career and you look at, you know, I hope I can remember both these. The one thing is like that whole jumping 18 feet, however many times, it's like, turns out you don't have to do that in practice, because last year, I don't think you made 18 feet one time in practice.
Yeah, I think, that's the crazy thing, folks. It's like, that's why people get so annoyed. I say people get so annoyed. I don't really think people get annoyed of it, but like some athletes will get irritated if I'm like, just drop down to a smaller pole. Like, you won't make the bungee, but who cares? Like, you don't need to make the bungee. Like,
No.
Sometimes it's important to say, hey, we're going to amp it up and get you to try to figure out how to make it and build up that athleticism. But like, building that, again, going back to that confidence on top of confidence, like for me, if I was in a workout and it was just not happening and we tried to push a pole and I wasn't getting into the pit on it, or I wasn't having a smooth jump, it's like, what's the point of that, you know?
Right.
And so for me last year, dealing with how much I dealt with the flu and the appendicitis and all that, it was like there were many weeks in there that I was still building, meaning my workouts were way harder. So I was coming into vault workouts not feeling as good, or I was sick and I was trying to pole vault, or I was coming off of a meet and trying to vault, you know, a few days after the meet. And so most of the time, most of my vault workouts weren't 100% fresh vault workouts.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, well, this is what we got this year, you know?
Right.
And that being said, I don't know if I may have made a 550 bungee like once,
Like probably
or something.
one time in practice last year.
But like, it was a way lower practice year, which I jumped pretty well in practice.
I know.
But
yeah.
and in the meets and stuff, I jumped really well. But it was almost like, how much are we willing to sacrifice just you feeling like you have earned making a 550 bungee or making this high of a bungee or whatever, versus knowing that you're going to head into the next meet jumping well regardless. Like,
Right.
I would end a practice not having made 550 and then go to a meet and jump 570.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to do. Is I was very protective around, and this was the other thing I was going to say, is I was very protective around you creating like rules and laws around your pole vaulting and your career. Like, and as you go on in pole vaulting, you can slowly start to acquire these little rules and like almost laws that like have to happen in order to unlock your potential. And some of those rules you create yourself through things you do during practice. Like, when I was jumping really well and I had that good meet, the practice before, I vaulted on this pole gripping this high. So then your brain is very good at trying to like sync those things up. And it's like, okay, if I want to have another performance like that, then I have to jump on this pole in practice gripping this high. And then that also goes back into the social media thing, is if you're not careful, you can slowly start to, without even you realizing it, you can see a video and you can say, if I want to jump 19 feet, then I have to jump 18 feet 5 times in a half an hour. And what my job was as the coach is to get you to just not have any rules or laws around your pole vaulting. It's like, no, there is nothing. There's just the workout. Like, you just execute the workout. There's no if this, then that. It's just execute the workout, do the best you can in the workout, pack it up, go home, next day, execute the workout, do your best, pack it up, and just continually do that without having those parameters, because those parameters can be so incredibly limiting.
Yeah, I was about to say that could be very limiting, especially our practice before Olympic trials, which is a good thing. So quick story, but the whole year last year I jumped on 5-meter poles, so 16.5 poles, and jumped well on them, and obviously had the indoors that was a little iffy, but then outdoors was jumping pretty consistent. But then it got to the point where my strength numbers and speed numbers were going pretty well. My bounding was going really, really well. And so my overall power was pretty dang good. And it just so happened the timing of those poles, they were just rolling through real fast, and I was kind of jumping over the top of them, and I couldn't catch the pole that well. And unfortunately, this was it was the workout before the Olympic trials. So I think, I guess the Friday before the next week was the Olympic trials, and that Friday was my last day vaulting, something like that. Mm-hmm. And what ended up happening was Jake and I were both well, you're rolling through all these poles, your biggest practice poles that you've been on, and the meet prior, I got to my biggest 5-meter pole that I owned, which is a 5-meter 12.3, and I didn't end up finishing a jump, but I planted it, and I was it was pretty dang stiff, but that was my last pole, and it's you're heading into the Olympic trials, you kind of want to have a bigger arsenal, kind of. And so the practice before, I finished a whole workout, or almost a whole workout, and then I was honestly, I know this seems weird, but I just feel I need to hit a 510. I need to hit which is a 16.9 pole. And what's so funny about that is in 2023 we jumped all outdoors on 510s, whether I liked it or whether Jake and I liked it or not. We were doing it to get some data for the year after, which was 2024, so that we didn't move to a different size pole in the middle of an Olympic year, not knowing what it did or what it felt like or what the numbers would be.
Yeah.
And so then we moved, and I was why don't we both were let's just hit one of the 510s, match your grip, go to the one that would be relatively close to this one. And we had the bungee at 580 or 590 for some reason that day. And I was just kind of smashing through it on the 5-meter poles. And then you
were blowing through bigger 5 meters than you normally would blow through, though.
Yeah. In practice, I was going to need to go to a normal, pretty big competition pole for me, which was a 5-meter 12.9. I was going to be going to that in practice, which is a pole that I jumped one of my highest 575 on, a bigger pole than I jumped on at Reno that year to jump 572. And so anyways, in the middle of the practice, we were just let's just hit it. Same numbers and everything, and I and first rip I was I gotta hit this thing and finish the jump, because I only have probably 2 or 3 more jumps the rest of the workout, and then we're going to the Olympic trials. And jump looked good. We went up to the next pole, jump looked good. Went up to the next pole, jump looked really good. Mm-hmm. And then we were just fully this is the exact situation we talk about, don't put parameters around what you need to do. If it's working, it's working. Mm-hmm. Accept it, move on. And we packed a full pole bag of 510 poles, went to the Olympic trials, and then that could kind of explain why my prelim round was a little rough, because we were still figuring out competition size ones.
I was so nervous about that, man.
Yeah, we were still figuring out the competition sized ones, and where to grip and certain things. Just when you move to a different pole, you start to lean back and lean forward and do all these different little things. So by the time I qualified for finals and I jumped in finals, I was feeling really good on them. But that's a classic example of you can't just say this is the way it is, black or white. We're staying on these poles the whole year, because you never know what's going to happen.
It'd be so much easier if it was just this or that. It would be so much easier, but that's just not what it is. All right, 2 more questions, quick. Music played a huge part in your whole career. What songs do you think of when you reflect on your career, and why?
I was actually thinking about this in the middle of this podcast. I was hoping a question like this would come up. So I grew up with two emo brothers in high school, Jake and Josh. We listened to a lot of like metal and just like Midwest emo music. Like that's a real thing. Like a lot of these bands come from the Midwest, but a lot of my vaulting was done and warming up was done to very heavy screamo music, and that's just how I got into my zone. But I have 3 songs that come to mind. What was it called? Oh yeah, "Aliens Are Ghosts" by Suicide Boys, and that's not a script. That's like more of a hip hop rap song, but that one really makes me think of like that Reno moment. And that's also a song that I listened to the day that I jumped 19. So like that's a song that really gets me going. "The Mountain" by Of Mice and Men.
Yep.
Got to have that one. And then I think the one that started it all was "Consume" by Polaris.
Yeah.
If you guys are looking
Polaris.
for some heavy music to listen to, those last 2 songs are amazing.
So "Consume" by Polaris was 2022.
That was 2022, but I also I refuse to listen to that song unless I'm like ready to go do something, because I like savor the song, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that one, 2022 and throughout like all of the time.
That's like the vault or die song.
Vault or die, like if you're not having a good vault workout, throw that one on. And then "The Mountain" was like 2023. And then actually I guess like "Aliens Are Ghosts" was more like 2024. But one last story about music is I was telling Colby about this. So if any of you, I would love to know if any of you have watched Neo Vault. I could be wrong on which one it is, but I think it's Neo Vault. Pretty sure it's The Reckoning with like Justin Norberg on it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a point where they do the recap of the Olympics, the Athens 2004 Olympics, where Tim Mack, Toby Stevenson, and the dude from Italy, but they played "The Kill" by 30 Seconds to Mars. And that song, like when it comes on, like it always puts me, like since I was a little kid, I used to always be like, this is the Olympic song. This is the Olympic song. And I would always listen to that and it would get me jacked up. And I never would listen to that before meets, weirdly enough. But the first song that I played when I started my warm-up at the Olympic trials, it was like the most serendipitous moment where I was like, I've got to do it.
That's cool.
And I put it on, and I remember just jogging around and being like, this is like the moment I actually have dreamed of my whole life, is to like be in a position where I'm competing to make an Olympic team. And that was like pretty crazy. But that's another really good one. But those are my ones.
Yeah, those are the 3 that I was going to say too. Lots of really, really good memories tied up in all of those songs.
I have songs that I remember specific like moments of, like certain songs that I listen to when I like set a PR on a lift or like a PR at a meet or something.
Right. Then there's the one that just popped into my head too, was the one that you got, that video of yours that went viral.
Oh, yeah. Take Me Higher by Montel 2099. Shout out James Stain for that. And he should be watching this, but James Stain, a New Zealand boy, vaulter, and he, in 2022, before that Chula meet that I jumped 575, he showed me a bunch of drum and bass. And he was like, dude, I'm telling you, this is the next thing. Like, drum and bass is like the like that type of music. And now the kids are probably like, oh, so that's why you play it all the time at Rise. Like I play that all the time. I've been to festivals for drum and bass music. Like I love that stuff now. So, but that one I made a video, and it Take Me Higher by Montel 2099, and it got like 10.5 million views or something. It's on my Instagram, so you can look it up.
That was hilarious, because all the kids at Rise were like, whenever they were vaulting, they were like, hey, put it on. You know, put on Luke's song. That's so funny. All right, so what's last kind of thing is, what are you doing now? Where do you see yourself at in 5 years? What are you going to do?
That's a good question. No babies on the way yet, but that can be predicted at some point in the next few years, maybe. But I have a dog. That's been really nice to be able to spend a bunch of time with him and my wife. honestly just spending a lot more time at home, and doing my best to get really good at drums and really good at skateboarding and guitar, and producing beats and stuff. I play a lot of music, and I have like a whole bunch of hobbies, so it wasn't that difficult to move on to other things because I could just spend
That's
time
good.
doing a lot of other stuff
Yeah.
that I've wanted to do. But I would say 5 years from now, we should have some really high jumpers here at Rise, which we already do, but even
Yeah.
higher jumpers that we do at Rise. I'll be playing drums real well and probably be traveling a whole bunch with Amber to wherever I want, whenever I want,
Yeah.
and not having to worry about not staying out late or all that kind of stuff. I'm just looking forward to, we're in our Amber era now is what we like to call it at home.
Hey.
We were in the Luke era for a long time, but deservingly,
Yeah, for a really long time.
we're in our Amber era now, and Amber Winder deserves to have some time doing whatever she wants to do. So
Sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up. I love you. I appreciate you
Love you
doing
too.
this. And yeah, it's the One More Jump podcast. Thanks again.
signing off.